Thank you so much, and thanks for being here. And I'm a big history buff, love history, mainly of Augusta. And I don't worry about what happened in 1736 and General Oglethorpe and all that, but I'm more interested in the individual things that I remember about Augusta. They used to be, but they're no longer here. Ordinarily, I'd stand up, but I wear suspenders. I don't want them popping and my pants fall down. And I'm going to touch on mainly on three topics today, and that's two of them my great grandfathers, uh, Edward Herman, Augusta Brewing Company, Edward Shinn, with Shinn's Excelsior Bottling Company, and the other one, if we have time, I'd like to touch on the Irish of Augusta, a little bit about the history. Now, one little tidbit I love about Augusta happened in when I was age 15. And I was walking down 7th Street one day, and this little girl was on the other side of the street. She was also 15. And I don't know if y'all remember them, but this little girl had a streak of peroxide in her hair. It was a big thing back in that day. And it was about the most wonderful thing I thought I'd ever seen. And so we went to the Miller Theater, I think, then. And that was, I married that girl, and we'd been married 60 something years. Oh, it's been a long time. Some tidbits of Augusta that I'm working on right now are things that are no longer here. I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember these. The Town Tavern, Mr. Willie Heffernan, St. Joseph Hospital. Anybody remember Sister Mary Louise Herman? Snappy's Hamburgers. Oh, Lord. Mr. Casella. Joe ate more than anybody in Augusta. J.B. White's on Broad Street. They had the elevator go up, creaking wooden floors. And the last one that I'm working on now, I don't know if anybody did it, was kind of tough on me. Miss Honore Price and social dancing. That was a wonderful experience. But you know what happens now? I'm so glad they're having these brown bags talking about family things and what used to be, because there's so many of us that are going to be gone. And with us leaving are going to be our memories that no longer with us, no longer with the community, so they're gone. One of my favorite, I've written several books, but one of my favorite quotes in one of the books has to do with family, that all of us have some kind of family, hopefully deeper than and still around. On a tree, we may grow in different directions, but our roots remain as one. Think about that. And I'm big on family because Crystal already asked about who's related. But once again, show of hands, is anybody who all related to either Herman's or Shinn clans? Only 1, 200. Okay. And we're glad to have you all with us too. But what are we going to do to keep things alive? And that's up to the museum, Augusta Museum of History here, because we need to have more brown bags like Phil will be talking about next week, and the fat boy last week, and talk about family histories. My first family history has to do with Edward Herman. He was born in America, but his family came from Biberach, Germany, near the Black Forest. And when Edward was about 20 years old in Indiana, he ran off and joined the Army, 1860. And I don't tell many people this, but he joined the United States Army against the Confederacy. I'm a sort of a Confederate, I think. So anyway, he joined that, and he went through the Army, and at an age about 25, he got out, and he mustered out of the Army in Louisville, Kentucky. And what happened when he got out, he met a girl whose father ran a bar there, saloon, and they ended up getting married, but Edward Herman went on to become president of Kentucky Malting Company, malt being an ingredient in beer. And all of a sudden, he and a couple of other partners said, well, we can make a lot more money if we start a brewery instead of just making ingredients. So they searched around all in the Southeast. Beer was a big thing then because so many people were getting out of the Army, and GIs really enjoyed drinking beer. So of all the places he searched, he went on to Augusta, Georgia, and this is the place he decided to land in to build his brewery. One of the key people that got him going in the brewery at Augusta was the mayor of Augusta, U.S. Senator Patrick Walsh. Patrick Walsh has a statue over here on Telfair Street. And Patrick Walsh pretty much talked him into going building the brewery here. Edward Herman also talked to Governor John B. Gordon at the time, and Governor Gordon told him no, that prohibition would never come to Georgia. Oh, Lord. So he ended up building the brewery, which was a large 7-8-story tall building on 13th Street over near Walton Way. Today, right in front of the Meadow Garden, George Walton complex over there. That's where it was located. And he built that along with his partners. And one of the partners and the first president of the brewery was a gentleman named August Swears. August Swears, usually Ann Swears Proctor's her great-grandfather, but he died early on after about 1 year in the presidency of the brewery. Edward Herman had to go back to Louisville trying to wrap up his business there. Edward Herman was very involved in the community here, and he ended up, his last thing before he got real sick, he was chairman of the finance committee of Sacred Heart Church when they were building that church over there. And so he is known for a lot of things in Augusta, brewing beer, and the chairman, and a lot of involvement in the community, especially with the mother church of Catholics and Irish in Augusta at that time was Sacred Heart Church. So everybody gathered around there, and I hope y'all get the chance to go through Sacred Heart if you hadn't been there lately. It's the Sacred Heart Cultural Center. So what happened to the brewery? It went along and employed probably about 100 people in its heyday. They delivered beer in horse-drawn wagons, and in the earliest days of the put out of the trucks, they also had a few trucks. And mainly what they produced was beer in bottles. They bottled and brewed, and also in casks or kegs of beer that they put out in the market also. So that went on probably from 1888 when they opened the door through the early 1900s, and then all of a sudden Prohibition came in. Prohibition, the outlawing of alcohol. And it was so, Prohibition ended up getting the brewery to go bankrupt about 1920 or so. And what happened during that period of time, not only did they put them out of business, they said they could no longer brew anything with alcohol, but they also required them to change the name of Augusta Brewing Company. No longer could it be called Augusta Brewing Company, nothing to do with brewing. But they also said you got to change the name. So the name they selected was Augusta Ice and Beverage Company. So you'll see that even in some bottles that I show up here on the slide collection. And then, as I said, in 1920s, they folded and went bankrupt. Otherwise, I'd be sitting up here as a brewery president. No longer am, unfortunately. One of their main brands of beer, their main brand was Belle of Georgia. Also, they put out other beers called Belle of Carolina, Belle of Florida, and they even went down into Cuba and sold some beer down into Cuba before they got outlawed anywhere in the United States and could no longer brew beer. And so from Cuba, Carolina, Florida, and all that, there's no bottles out existing because the bottles of those days was paper labels. You'll see some on here. That's an embossed label here. There's still a lot of them around, but paper labels went away. They just got dissolved. So there are no bottles of that era. That kind of touches on my grandfather Herman, great-grandfather Herman. Now I'd like to move into my great-grandfather Shin. In 1899, in the old Sacred Heart Church, which is the Red Cross building today on Ellis Street, Edward Herman's son, Will Herman, married Edward Shin's daughter, Mamie Shin, and that connected us to the German-Irish Shin-Herman clan. And here we are today in both clans. Whereas Herman was kind of a conservative fellow, Edward Shin was a little more on the wild side, I would say. And I have to say, y'all don't repeat this, but he went to jail a few times. And Edward Shin's oldest son, John Augusta Shin, we call him Uncle Johnny, was his right-hand man in all his business ventures. The first venture they went into was a bottling company. Well, when Shin came across the big pond, Shin was born about 1860 and came across the pond when he was 15 years old. He came by himself. He got out in New York, took a ship down to Savannah, and at Savannah, he got out and there was a gentleman down there who was in the bottling business named John Ryan. John Ryan is another very popular bottle that people collect. And John Ryan was an Irishman in Savannah who gave a lot of young Irishmen jobs, and he gave Shin a job of washing bottles. I don't know how to wash them, but they did in those days. And so Edward Shin and John Ryan became partners. And what they did, Ryan's expanded from Savannah out into Augusta, Macon, Atlanta. Well, Ryan had so much trouble having managers that he sent Shin to Augusta to be his manager here in Augusta. And so Shin operated the Ryan facility here. It was on Broad Street. And over on Broad Street, there were several bottlers over there. And but the main bottler became Ryan in Augusta, and Ryan decided to retire. And when he retired, he left all the facility for bottling and all that to Edward Shin. Ryan's name of Ryan's operation was Ryan Excelsior Bottling Works. So Shin took over the name Shin Excelsior Bottling Works. Ryan came out of New York, and Excelsior is in the New York State label, meaning great things or something. So Shin took over that operation and went into other ventures. Shin bottled soda water, and Shin had the opportunity to take on Coca-Cola, but Shin produced a soft drink of his own, and he did not think Coca-Cola tasted good. Otherwise, here we'd be with a lot of monies. And among other things, Shin had a saloon, and it was at 1100 block of Broad Street. The buildings are still there. Shin's Bottling Works was on Green Street at 1025 Green Street. It's no longer there. It used to be an A&P, I think it was, after Shin. But it is gone. And I don't know if this is a lot of people, but when Edward Shin died in 1920 or so, he had 25 grandchildren. Is that a lot? I guess it is. I don't quite have that many. So 25 is a lot, but he was a great family man and had a great family. They had 10 children, and as I said, 25 grandchildren. And today, between the Herman and the Shin clans, is probably the largest clan in Augusta, maybe rivaled by the Mulherron clan and a few others. But Edward Shin was his facility, mainly his saloon, was during the era of Prohibition. And I don't think they read the note that Prohibition had kicked in, because they still sold liquor. Now Shin went to several times, went to jail, as did his son, but Shin got so old that they let him out of jail, but they kept Uncle Johnny in jail. And from the Augusta Chronicle of 1920, warrants were last night issued for the arrest of John A. Shin and Edward Shin, charged of violating the Prohibition law. So he went, and all this is documented in almost all records of the Chronicle. I love the Chronicle archives. Another one of 1915, he even went to jail in 1915. And it said, dry officers continue raids. One successful raid was made on Edward Shin's facility at 1137 Broad Street. Now, I mentioned Uncle Johnny before, but Uncle Johnny was a very popular Augustan. People loved him. And he married a wife, Aunt Pearl. And he and Aunt Pearl were out. They came from their house, which was on Ellis Street, rode over to Culloch Street. Anybody know what Culloch Street is? 11th Street, right. And he and his buggy and his wife, they were on that horse coming out, and the headline says, almost fatal runaway. The buggy overturned, almost killed John Shin and his wife, who were thrown violently on the asphalt. But this was 1900, and he thankfully recovered. But Uncle Johnny was so popular in Augusta that when he went to jail, he always had his own jail cell there. And his sisters, he had about 7, 8 sisters, and they all went over and decorated it with curtains and lacy linens and all that. And I always wondered why was soda water so big back in those days? Anybody know what soda water is? Soda could be flavoring in it like Coke, but like club soda of today. And that was because Augusta drinking water was so bad back in the day, and men loved to drink liquor, so they couldn't mix it with city water. They had to put soda water in it. That's my theory. I was nothing to source it out. And then when Shin died, Uncle Johnny went over and had another saloon over on by the old Union Station of Augusta. And it was a very popular. I went there several times with some of my siblings, and he would always let us reach in the Cracker Barrel, old Lance, big old jars of crackers, and we could pick out crackers or candy. Uncle Johnny was a wonderful man. And I think that's all I got touching on right now on Shin. And my last item of today would be a little touch on the Augusta Irish. And I've recently written a book on the Augusta Irish, but to me it's real interesting. I go back again on the Chronicles, archives, Augusta Chronicle. And the very first Irish gathering in that thing was held in the year 1801 in Augusta. It was, I think, at the Globe Hotel. They had men gathering, and they would offer toast. And this was only about 25 years after America had been formed. So it's interesting. And some of the toasts that they had to Ireland: may her heart yet be strung to freedom. Ireland was always looking for its freedom. To the immortal memory of St. Patrick. May the shamrock yet bloom again on Irish soil. And listen to this. To Thomas Jefferson, President of the United States. He was president then. To the memory of George Washington, who had just recently died. And so it went on like that with men. It was mainly Hibernians who held these dinners. Hibernian being an association of the Irish. And then in the 1900s was the first Irish parade. And it was the first marching parade they had, and it was down Broad Street, just like it is today. And then what happened, it kind of faded away in 1902. The Knights of Columbus became very popular during that early era of the 1900s. And again, the great Irishman of Augusta, Patrick Walsh, he was born in Ireland and he died in Augusta in 1899. So that spurred on a lot of Knights of Columbus and even Irish emphasis in Augusta. And then in the 1970s, the Irish of Augusta gained big time momentum when a group of men and ladies decided to, why don't we, instead of going to Savannah all the time, why don't we have something in Augusta? And what they did, it was mainly the ladies of Augusta who got together, my mother being one. The leader of the group was Marion Shearer, and Marion had about 20 ladies, and they would always meet at St. Patrick's Day at the Church of the Most Holy Trinity, we call it St. Patrick's, on Telfair Street. And they would go to Mass there, and then they'd walk over to the town tavern for lunch afterwards. So this went on for several years until about 1976, when the men started drinking a lot. Here we go again. And they decided the idea of Irish society grew bigger and bigger and bigger. And so they formed a group called the Irish American Heritage Society. And that was about 1976. And originally, it was restricted to 50 members of that society. Today, the society has 500 members or more. And also, the men decided, after drinking a lot, we don't want any ladies in here. So Oh Lord, the ladies started the whole thing. Really, they were the emphasis, but the men kind of tossed them out. Today, there are probably more ladies in it than there are men, and so the society moves on. And today we have spectators of the parade goes on. It'll be coming Monday, I think it is, and there'll be about uh, there'll be about 5,000 spectators in Augusta, lined up all over the place, and they have about 100 floats. And so it's a great, grand thing to see, and I hope you all can go there and take in the parade. I've about gotten too old to walk in it myself, but it's a great parade that should be looked at and attended by old-time Augustans and new ones alike. I'd like to open it up for any questions that anybody might have about the topics that I touched on today. Yes, sir.
Noticing some of the photos that you had, all the bottles were alike except for color. Is that a certain? Is there a certain reason they're different colors?
No, there's not really any particular reason other than they bought them from the bottling manufactured glass guy. There used to be one in Augusta, and every glass place had a different. Some of them had clear glass, some amber, some blue, some greenish or so. And it did not affect the flavor of beer in those days like it does today. And during my lifetime, I was in the beer distributing business. There was always a big flap between, I sold Miller and Coors, and Miller was in a clear glass bottle. Anheuser-Busch Budweiser was in a brown glass. And they kept back and forth. You need it beer in brown glass to make it taste good. And this guy said, no, it doesn't affect it. So it could have affected the flavor, but no longer. And what happens there used to be only Pilsner type beer. And then the Germans in the 1850s brought in lager beer. And lager was more shelf stable than any other beer. So, you know what the bottle that's most worth is the blue, cobalt blue bottle. If you ever see one of those, let me know. Edward Herman went bankrupt. Well, he went back to Louisville, Kentucky on the Herman side. And in Kentucky, they were involved in a saloon again. Prohibition was over and not enforced in Kentucky. So, and I forgot to mention one thing back on Edward Shinn. Uh, Edward Shinn and his wife, when he came to Augusta with, I'm rambling on a little bit, but when he came to Augusta for Ryan, he met a young lady who was in Augusta who was also from County Cork, Ireland. Her name was Annie Hickey. And Edward and Annie got married at Sacred St. Patrick Church. And it was unbelievably the beginning of the Shinn clan 150 years ago this year. And that's kind of remarkable to me.
I want to add a little to the lady's question. Did not, after the brewery went bankrupt, they started Herman's self-serve grocery store?
That is correct.
And it was, if I'm not mistaken, one of the earliest grocery stores that you could actually go in and pick out what you wanted instead of telling the proprietor, who would then go get what you wanted and bring it to the front.
Self-serve grocery
Right.
that we see today. Back in the old days, they used to have to pick it off the shelf for you. And then that was Edward Herman's son, Will Herman, had that grocery store. And it was called Herman's Self-Serve Grocery Store. It was over here also on Broad Street around 11th Street. Those were the good old days. Yes, sir.
There was a Shannon and Doyle brewery or bottling company. Do you know when that existed?
I've got one of the bottles of Shin and Doyle. Doyle was a best friend of Shin, and Doyle was in Shin's wedding when he got married. So they were just partners, and they had a bottle. I don't think they ever had, to my knowledge, didn't have a facility or anything, but they had many bottles, and they're highly collectibles. And it was,
Doyle was my great grandfather.
oh my goodness, I don't even not sure what his full name. Do you remember? Any idea? What was Doyle's full name?
James Cornell Doyle.
Okay, gosh, I got to write that down. Yes, Anna.
How do you find the bottles? How long have you been collecting them? Can you still find them today?
They're hard to find today, but they are available, and usually buy them off of eBay or something like that.
Did you just kind of inherit them to begin with?
What I had is my friend. I had two friends, Bill Babb. Everybody at the museum remembers Bill. He's still around. And then Mike Newman, a high-end bottle collector. They ended up helping me acquire my collection. In my collection, it may not be the best, but I went for quality, not quantity. And so I've got an excellent collection. And one of my favorite things are the little mugs. I've got pictures up here of the little mugs, and they were kind of sampling things that you drank out of. And that was given to me by one of Edward Herman's other sons, Joseph Leo Herman. His wife was Catherine Sheridan, a very popular Augustan. And when Catherine got elderly, she gave me some of the mugs. I'm eternally grateful for that.
Tell them about how Bill Babb found bottles.
I don't.
Bill Babb,
Yeah.
the bottle searcher.
Yes. Well, they used to come around all in Augusta, the dump zones, trash piles. They used to have them, and what they did, they brought these big rear. I don't know if this is what you're getting at, but they had the big grapple hooks that went down, dug dirt, and they'd come out, and half the bottles they pulled out were broken up, and the other half were good, and they cleaned them and sold them off and made a lot of money on that. What do you think?
Bill Babb also went, nobody else would do this but Bill Babb. He went under old buildings along Broad Street all the way from 13th to 5th Street. He dig under there, and a lot of them had been bars back in the, even in the Prohibition time. He found bottles. And just searched and found bottles.
Most of the time it was legal.
Ah,
We got Bill Babb's collection. It's donated to the museum. If you want it, I mean, it's over 700 bottles he collected. Wow. It's amazing. It's an encyclopedia of bottles for Augusta.
and would you tell, somebody asked me earlier, but where can they see Bill Babb's bottles?
Here, we have a display in a hallway down here, that much of it. Not a whole lot. I mean, most of it's in storage, but we plan on rotating.
Yeah, thank you. That's Anna Holly, who is one of Edward's great-grandchildren too. And that's, how can we keep it going? That's the question to me. How do we get young people interested?
They're here today.
Some of them are here. Yeah. some
One
are
more
here.
question?
Yeah, do you sell your books by any chance?
Unfortunately, about they're out of print, and they're all gone. I've donated most of them to, like, my latest one is the Irish book, and I've donated most of mine to the Augusta Irish Society.
You got one today?
I do have one for Dr. Caldwell. Can you give that to her? Thank you. For the Reese. Dr. Caldwell has some input with the Reese Library on Augusta campus, Augusta College campus. We went to Augusta College. We didn't go to Augusta University.
Another Bill Babb story is that my father and my siblings owned a small interest in the old Boy Scout lake that was on Boy Scout Road. It's now gone. And Bill Babb used to call our mother and say, Miss Herman, do you mind if I go out to the Boy Scout lake and pick up snakes? And she said, Bill, you go out there and you can have every snake you can find.
Yeah, that's true. Very true.
Have you ever found a Florida Bell bottle?
I have not found any, although I've looked quite a bit. But there's Bell of Florida, Bell of Carolina, and they went into North Carolina, South Carolina. But why are there no bottles there? Because the labels on those bottles were, those are mugs I mentioned earlier. But the reason is they had paper labels on them. There you go. That was a soda that they put out, Upper 10 ginger ale. And all those, you see how that label is deteriorating very badly. So if you found a bottle today, it wouldn't have the label on it. I've got a couple of labeled bottles that Bill Babb helped me get, and they're in poor shape. But they had no such thing. They were long neck crown top bottles, and if you found one, it'd probably be worth $10,000. Let's be on the lookout.
Taste any of these things? Do you know what they tasted like?
That's an interesting question, because I think it was the year 1995 or so, when I was in the beer distributing business with Coors and Miller. We brought out a reintroduction of the Belle of Georgia beer brand. And it was mainly in kegs, not bottles, because kegs were easier to produce, brew. And so we introduced it in 1995, and we did not plan on keeping it long term because we were so busy with our regular business. And what we did an in-depth research of the recipe for that beer. And we had a group of about 10 people who helped me kind of formulate the beer brand. And it ended up a rather somewhat dark amber lager beer, which was deep in flavor. And as I always say, hearty, deep, and rich, and deep down good. And so we put it out. We don't really have the original recipe. I wish we did. Same thing with the soda water or ginger ales. I think in those days they only just put out soda water and popped in some flavor, and that was it. Unfortunately, it was another slip through the hands of Augusta Brewing Company. Then they did, in fact, produce Pepsi Cola, as did many other places in the Southeast. And so if you see, those are extremely rare bottles, and they're embossed on the bottom. The Augusta Brewing Company bottles embossed with Pepsi Cola. And if you notice in the little, you can hardly see it, but it's a 5 cent number 5. They cost 5 cents in those days. And that, I've only got a few of them, but I wish I had a dozen of them because they're worth a pretty penny. Pretty penny. Yeah.
The Belle of Carolina and the Belle of Florida, and I don't know that this can be answered, but is that exactly really the same beer as the Belle of Georgia, just in a different bottle?
I believe it was. In fact, they brewed it here. They shipped it because Carolina's so close, South and North Carolina, and then Florida very close. So they brewed it here, bottled it here, shipped it down to these states. And both they were very, don't, and as I said earlier, there's no bottles existing, but there are advertisings that I've got some very nice advertising pieces in the Jacksonville newspaper and one in the North Carolina newspaper. So I wish they were still around. Okay, well, thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.